My name's Guy Johnston. I've been a fisherman for over 45 years. My father's family has farmed here in the Cowichan Valley for over 100 years. So I'm not from a fishing family, and that's not how I got into fishing. One of my high school teachers, we used to fish in the summer, and I started going fishing with him as soon as I finished high school. And it was a really eye-opening experience for me, a real whole different world. And I've been fishing ever since. CSF is like Community Supported Agriculture, where both the community and the food producer, in this case, me as a fisherman, we come together. People in the community buy a share of our catch. This then provides the money for me to be able to repair my vessel, because people are buying their share of fish ahead of the fishing season. I was really attracted to fishing because I could see, watching my skipper and that, it really is a study of nature. You have to understand what's going on with the tides and the current, the weather, how that affects the behavior of the salmon or the prawns, and be able to read the undersea terrain and what impacts it's going to have on currents and that. So it's really an ever-changing sort of challenge.
So we'll only do 50 fathoms of buoy line?
One of the real blessings I've had as being a fisherman is that I've been able to involve my family in fishing with me. My kids came at a young age with me and my wife fishing, out just watching and hanging around. And then as they got older, they both came and started to work on the boat with them and their friends for many, many years. And that's a real treat, I think, when you can work with your kids, and as your relationship changes from just being a parent to where they're part of the people that you work with, and that's been very, very fortunate.
I think the greatest gift that fishing maybe gave my relationship with me and my father is that we had to learn how to become friends, but we also had to learn how to become co-workers, which is not normal, I think, for a daughter and a father. And I remember, like, on very specific instances where I was like, oh, this is bothering me, but not in a daughter way, like in an employee way. And I have to, like, inform him, I'm not having this conversation as your daughter, I'm having it as your employee. But then he would always be like, okay, I'll put, like, my employee ears on and listen to you in that way. And I think he always gave me the benefit of the doubt.
Looking at the industrial fishery here in Canada as I've grown up, it's become very clear and much more pronounced. Many of the benefits are being taken away from the people who are working on deck, from the coastal communities and First Nations, and they're going elsewhere. 70 to 80% of the seafood eaten in Canada is imported. And it's not because we don't have really rich fishing grounds. We're actually the 5th largest producer of seafood in the world. We export 85% of what's caught in Canada. Some of the really strange things that we've done, particularly since free trade, is we've lost all the canneries except for one on the BC coast. We ship our salmon unprocessed, just frozen, to Asia, all the way across the Pacific to China, Vietnam, or Thailand. It gets canned there and shipped all the way back. So you're talking about a 20,000 kilometer voyage, and it's as if we're saying there is no environmental cost to shipping all that fish all the way halfway around the world, and there obviously is.
Any fish caught in Canada had to be landed in Canada and processed in Canada. And the reason for that was it produced jobs for Canadians, but it also allowed Canada to count the catch and be clear on what the catch was so we could manage better. But under the trade rules that were in place, Americans were successful in forcing Canada to abandon that rule. So for the first time in 1989, fish could be exported to the United States raw, without any processing. The strength of the union came from the fact that fishermen would stop fishing, but if there was fish caught, it couldn't be processed because the shore workers would be on strike as well. So the entire industry would be on strike. That all ceased to be effective once the fish could leave and go to the United States, which it did. So the strike lasted for a long time because downtown in Vancouver, where the canneries were shut down. They were on strike. The fishermen were also on strike, but they could see people fishing, and they were trying to figure out what was happening to the fish, because for the first time, fish that was caught during a strike was exported by truck across the line to the United States to a cannery in Bellingham, Washington, where there was no union and no possibility of picketing. The number of jobs here in BC has gone down, 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 to the point where there really is no canning industry here in BC at all.
As the climate crisis started to have a bigger and bigger impact on the fishery, we saw our salmon runs that, they've always had a flow and ebb, but we started to have really dramatic. We've had the smallest, in the past 20 years, the smallest runs we've ever had in recorded history, coupled with the largest runs that we've had in 100 years. So it became much more erratic, much harder for us as fishermen to be stable.
With climate change, salmon, like people, are facing an existential crisis. No surprise, I've been a biologist for 45 years. I've learned that salmon need water, right? And not just any water. They need water of a certain quality and a certain temperature. Here in the Cowichan Valley, we're seeing major changes. I remember about 10 years ago, we had the scientists at UVic in the Pacific Climate Impact Consortium do some downscaled climate modeling for our valley specifically. And they said, you know what? You're gonna have warmer, wetter winters and hotter, drier summers. More flooding, more drought. And they said that by 2050, so 25 years from now, what is an extreme drought year for you is going to be normal. It's going to be every year. And we're seeing that. In our watershed, we've been managing water through a weir since 1957. So that weir is almost as old as I am. It's been there a long time. And we've been able to store a little bit of water in the spring so we can release it in the summer. That weir never failed to deliver all the water we needed for environmental flows for fish and for industrial flows for the first 40 years of existence. Never failed. The last 20 years, it's failed 16 times. the last 20 years, we've had to move salmon upstream in the back of trucks because there wasn't enough water for them to swim. We've had to pump water out of the lake to keep the river alive. We've had our river on life support. And last year, for the first time, we had a significant fish kill where we lost tens, probably hundreds of thousands of juvenile salmon in the Cowichan River. It's never happened before, not enough water, too warm water. So the future of salmon in our watershed and many others is threatened, not sometime in the future, right now.
So Project 84,000 came about because I was at a number of different community meetings and I was hearing stories about the fish that died in the Cowichan River. So there might be changes in the health of the cedar or changes in obviously the water level where they see a stream actually go from flourishing to dried out. You know, it can be very quick that this change happens. You know, noticing the feeling in themselves as the environment is changing around them, I thought it would be really helpful for us to really connect in with a sense of grief that might be arising, just a broader sense of ecological grief.
Wait, guys, you can tell story this way.
I really wanted to take a moment and acknowledge the loss and the heaviness of the loss of those fish, and to help us really comprehend what that means. How big is that number, 84,000?
The industrial food system is contributing about between 25 and 40% to all greenhouse gas emissions. Building a short food supply chain is a challenge because we don't have the infrastructure. We have a lot of fragmentation at the local level, and we have a big infrastructure gaps, so gaps that people all around the world are experiencing. Storage for local food, transportation that's dedicated to local food. Most of the infrastructure that moves our food around the world now is owned by a very small number of corporations. So what we're trying to do in building short local food supply chains is follow a circular economy model and have the food produced and distributed, processed as necessary, primary processing, as close to home as possible. All of that happening as close to home and as diverse as possible, so as many people involved as possible.
It was really clear the impacts of climate change, and I really felt, well, what can I do? So in my operation, we're trying to fish within those ecological limits. That we're trying to bring those benefits back to the people with boots on the deck in the communities and First Nations that we're based in. And so I looked at some friends of mine who operate community supported agriculture and started to talk to them about how does this work? Could it maybe apply in the fishing industry? And 14 years ago, me and some friends of mine decided, okay, let's give it a whirl.
I think the way that he makes sure that everything is up to standard is he convinces you to care about it.
Oh, wow.
You know?
Deep.
Well,
No, it's true.
It's
I
kind of
think
good.
it's
It's like
I think it's
you're
beautiful.
sitting there,
It's
you're packing
amazing.
prawns in the box, or you're dressing your fish, and you're like, well, I could do a bad job, and I probably wouldn't get caught. But you know that if you did, eventually it would get feedback, and it would be bad.
Yeah. In simplest terms, he fronts paying people well as showing that, like, that's how a part of how you can care is I'm paying you well because I believe in how much you can care. And then that helps to front load how much he would in turn care.
I think that the CSF is a manifestation of that in a way. He cares about what he does and he wants to share it with his community. He cares about working in an industry that he can sustain and create a livelihood out of and create something that, you know, other people could emulate or, you know, make fishing something that you can make a living off of on the coast.
Here on Oldley Farm, you started a CSA program, and I think a lot of the same problems small boat fishermen like me have are similar to the ones that small-time farmers have as well, in terms of trying to be financially viable, and I think in the broader context, trying to do things having a positive impact in sustainable food systems. So, you know, I'll be quite frank. Does the CSA make a difference for you in operating your farm? Is it a viable operation?
Definitely. Largely because we can get a retail price and we're cutting out the middle person, and in creating a stronger relationship with the consumers, the people who come to the farm and buy vegetables. And so, and it's way more efficient knowing exactly how much we need to grow and for how many,
Right.
for how much we need to harvest that day. We know how many families are going to come to pick up. So there's a lot less waste, and overall it's been very positive. Obviously we're a small farm, and so it's really a drop in the bucket. However, we tend to create larger impacts with other farmers see what we're doing, so they start their own CSA. The families who come to the farm to pick up their vegetables every week, and I talk to them face to face, tell them about all the issues that I have to deal with. It's an educational process, so we're educating consumers. I know there's tons of farms who have CSAs. Are there a lot of fisher people who?
There's a few on the East Coast. There's not many. There's really only 2 here on the West Coast so far.
Community-supported fisheries are based around core sets of values. And some of those values are anchored in just and equitable food systems. So what we're trying to do is build a seafood system that benefits people and the planet in a fair and equitable way. I think most people don't realize that the typical industrial seafood supply chain is very long, that seafood changes hands maybe a dozen times from harvest to the home cook. And all along the way, the story gets lost of what it is, or how it was caught, or who caught it, or where in the world it was caught. And the quality can go down, the costs go up. So the industrial seafood supply chain has a lot of problems. Community-supported fisheries solve for so many of those problems because the end consumer is connected directly to the fishing family. And so the story about exactly who caught it, where and when and how travels with that seafood right to the home cook. So when people commit to a share of seafood from one particular fishing family or a group of fishing families, they're committing to eat with the ecosystem. And so they say, we understand that different species are abundant in different places at different times, and we're going to eat what is the best option, the most abundant, the most sustainable option that comes from the sea.
It's nice to see it go to local community members instead of some kind of big fish plant buying everything. It's nice that you can see the, faces of people that are enjoying the actual food that comes right off the boat instead of going to a middleman and, processing plants and all that stuff. It just goes straight from the boat to the person and to their family, and how appreciative they are of us doing what we do.
There are too few people that really care about salmon not to be working together. And I think in BC we have kind of a checkered history of that a lot of people that care about salmon, or many of us, haven't done a good job of working together. So I think that's really key, is that we need to be solid and we need to be strong together.
Community supported fishery, for me, is a way to really express we're part of this ecosystem, the human community, nature, all of it. The CSF was a way to really respect and honor how grateful I am that I've been able to spend my whole life fishing on this coast. And I think finding those ways to fish in a more sustainable way, to support my coastal community and coastal First Nations, and help make us all more resilient. And I think the CSF is part of those answers, and all the people in our community involved in that is part of making the ecosystem a more resilient and sustainable one.
Again, sun rises on these windswept bodies. Home in dreams. With this catch return, will the shore yet catch us?